I used to believe that if I kept my head down and worked hard enough, people would eventually respect me. That was the lie I told myself every morning when I walked through the glass doors of the office, clutching my coffee like a shield, hoping today would be different. I was 25, still new to the corporate world, eager to prove that I belonged. But from the moment I started at that company, I was marked, different, noticeable in ways I wished I could hide. It wasn't my work they ridiculed. Numbers didn't lie, reports didn't fail, and my performance was as sharp as anyone else's, sometimes sharper. But to them, that didn't matter. It was the way I walked, the slight softness in my voice, the way I dressed a little too carefully, a little too neatly. To them, those things were enough to make me a target. The whispers started small. A laugh at the way I held my pen. A smirk when I bent down to pick up a file. "Watch out, he might steal your boyfriend," one guy muttered under his breath in the break room, just loud enough for the others to hear. They burst out laughing. I pretended not to hear, staring into my coffee as though it held the answers to every cruel thing in the world. But pretending not to hear didn't protect me. It only emboldened them. Soon the jokes became open, sharper. "Hey, sweetheart, love the shirt," a coworker sneered one morning, tugging at his own tie mockingly. "Did you borrow it from your boyfriend?" His friends snorted behind him. Another time, during a lunch meeting, someone dropped a fork and said, "Don't worry, he'll get it. He's good at bending over." The table roared. My face burned so hot I thought it might set the room on fire. I forced a laugh, weak and trembling, because silence would only make me look like I couldn't take a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was never a joke. Every night I went home exhausted, not from the workload but from the effort of pretending their words didn't cut me to pieces. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying their laughter, wondering why I wasn't strong enough to clap back. Why did I always sit there in silence, cheeks burning, heart pounding, pretending? And then there was my boss. If I had hoped he might intervene, I was sorely mistaken. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man who carried authority like a weapon. At first, he ignored the comments, letting them bounce off the walls like background noise. But over time, he joined in, finding amusement in chipping away at me in front of everyone. "Are you really going to wear that color to the meeting?" he asked once, smirking at my light blue blazer. "You're supposed to impress the clients, not their wives." Laughter. Always laughter. In team meetings, he undermined me deliberately. If I spoke up with an idea, he'd interrupt. "Let's hear from someone who actually knows what they're talking about." My words hung in the air like smoke, dismissed, unwanted. Once, I stayed late to finish a report that no one else wanted to touch. When I handed it to him the next morning, carefully formatted and polished, he skimmed the first page and shrugged. "I guess even you can get something right once in a while." The way he said "even you" left me hollow. The humiliation wasn't just in the words. It was in the way they watched me, waiting for me to flinch, waiting for me to break. I knew if I snapped, if I fought back, I'd be branded dramatic, sensitive, unstable. So I swallowed it all, day after day, until the taste of bitterness was a permanent fixture in my mouth. My silence made me complicit in their eyes. They thought I didn't mind, that I accepted their cruelty as truth. And maybe a part of me did. Maybe a part of me believed them when they said I wasn't man enough, that I'd never be more than the weak, soft one they could kick around to feel powerful. Strange, the way shame works. It seeps into you, quiet and relentless, until you start to see yourself through their eyes. I stopped wearing the clothes I liked, traded bright colors for muted grays. I spoke less, smiled less, made myself small so maybe, just maybe, they would forget I existed. But shrinking never made me safer. It only made the laughter louder. One afternoon, I overheard them in the hallway. "He probably dreams about the boss every night." One of them whispered, snickering. "No wonder he stays late. Must be waiting for his chance." The others cackled. I leaned against the bathroom sink afterward, gripping the porcelain so hard my knuckles turned white. My reflection looked back at me, tired, defeated, a ghost of the person I wanted to be. "Why do you let them do this to you?" I whispered to myself. But the mirror had no answer. That night, I walked home under the yellow streetlights, the city buzzing around me, but I felt utterly alone. My heart was heavy with humiliation, my chest tight with unspoken words. I wondered if this was all my life would be, working twice as hard only to be mocked, hiding who I was just to survive. Every day ended the same, me, lying in bed, staring into the dark, wondering if there was a place in this world where someone like me could exist without ridicule. I longed for kindness, for someone to see me not as a joke, not as a weakness, but as a human being worthy of respect. But in that office, surrounded by laughter and whispers, that hope felt like a cruel fantasy. And so I endured. I walked through those glass doors every morning, straightened my tie, and braced myself for the next round of humiliation. Pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I didn't care, pretending, until the day everything changed. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because I had barely slept the night before, haunted by the usual anxiety that came with walking into that building. My coffee sat cold on my desk as I tried to focus on a quarterly budget spreadsheet, eyes dry, mind scattered. That morning, I found a red sticky note slapped onto a printout I'd submitted the day before. One sentence, scribbled in black ink. Missing totals on Q3. Fix immediately. But I triple-checked that report before turning it in. It had been perfect. I opened the file again just to be sure. And there it was, everything in order, formulas intact, nothing missing. I knew what this was. A setup. Still, I fixed it. Printed another copy. Walked it silently to my boss's office. He didn't even look up. Just snatched the paper from my hands, glanced at it, then leaned back in his chair with that smug, sideways grin that always made my stomach knot. You know, some of us actually double-check our work before wasting other people's time, he said. Loudly, just loud enough for the people passing by in the hallway to hear. I stood there frozen, my face flushing. I did double-check it, I replied quietly. He chuckled. Clearly not hard enough. This kind of sloppiness? It's why no one wants to work with you. I wanted to scream, wanted to defend myself, to pull out the email receipts, to show him the audit trail in the Excel sheet. But I knew it wouldn't matter. It was never about the numbers. Later that afternoon, he called me into the conference room. Several people were already there. HR, a senior manager I barely spoke to, and my boss, sitting at the head of the table like a king ready to pass judgment. I hadn't even sat down before he spoke. We've reviewed your recent performance and identified consistent carelessness in your work. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Just like that. No conversation. No warning. No explanation beyond carelessness. I stood there, mouth dry, heart pounding. What are you talking about? My reports have been spotless. He leaned forward, folding his hands. We don't need your kind here. It's not just about your work. It's about fit, culture, image, culture, image. The words rang louder than anything else in the room. HR shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I looked at her, then at him, then at the others, all avoiding my eyes. So this was it. I was being fired not because of my work, but because of who I was. You can collect your things now, he said with a dismissive wave. Security will escort you out. As I turned to leave, I heard him mutter under his breath, finally, and that was the last straw. Tears blurred my vision as I walked back to my desk. People were watching now, peeking over monitors and pretending not to stare. No one said a word. Not even the guy I used to eat lunch with occasionally. Not even the girl who once asked to borrow my charger. Cowards, all of them. I packed what little I had. A photo of me and my sister from college, a half-dead plant, some pens, my headphones, and shoved them into a cardboard box. I moved slowly, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of watching me rush out in shame. Still, my hands shook. And when I stepped outside into the harsh afternoon light, the box clutched against my chest like a life vest. I felt something break inside me. I walked for hours that day. No destination. Just me, my feet, and the dull roar of traffic. I stopped by the river and sat on a bench until the sun started to fall behind the buildings. And then I walked home, into the silence of my tiny apartment that felt suddenly too big and too cold. That night I didn't eat. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling, numb. The next day, I stayed in bed until noon. The day after, I didn't get out of bed at all. The messages came in slowly. First my landlord, rent was due. Then the student loan reminders. Then the texts from my sister asking if I was okay. I ignored them all. I had some savings, but not much. A month's rent, maybe two if I cut back hard. But even that felt like a ticking clock now. The anxiety of job hunting loomed large, but worse was the emptiness. I had no reference, no dignity, no sense of who I was anymore. Every time I opened my laptop to apply somewhere, I saw my reflection in the screen. Puffy eyes, unshaven face, the dull ache in my chest. Who would hire me? What would I say? That I was fired for being the wrong fit? That I had let people humiliate me until they pushed me out? That I didn't stand up for myself because I was too scared of being called dramatic? Some days I just sat on the couch in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and wondering if the world would notice if I disappeared. The worst part wasn't losing the job. It was losing the version of myself who still believed that being kind, hardworking, and respectful would earn me safety. I had followed every rule, checked every box, smiled through every insult. And still, they had tossed me aside like I was nothing. One night, I opened my closet and stared at my clothes. The shirts I used to love, the ones with a little flair, the colors I stopped wearing because they made me too noticeable. I ran my hand along a lavender button-down I hadn't touched in months. The fabric felt soft, like a memory of someone I used to be. And I broke down, collapsed onto the floor, clutching that shirt to my chest, sobbing into it like it could bring me back to life. I cried for everything. Every slur, every fake smile. Every day I let myself be small just to make others comfortable. I cried because I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending, tired of surviving in a world that didn't want me. And then I stopped crying. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the turning point. The last day I'd feel like a victim, because something was about to happen that would change everything. I hadn't checked my email in days. What was the point? I had no job, no offers, and nothing to wake up for except another day of silence. So when my phone buzzed late Tuesday morning with a subject line that read, Employment Status Review, Confidential, from someone named Mr. D. Kingswell, I almost deleted it without opening it. But something about the name made me pause. Daniel Kingswell, the CEO of the company that had tossed me out like yesterday's trash. Curious, suspicious, confused. I opened the email. Mr. Ashford, I would like to speak with you personally regarding your recent departure from the company. Please let me know if you're available to meet this Thursday at 10 a.m. D. Kingswell, CEO. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. What could he possibly want? The man was a myth, spoken of in polished terms, seen only in passing on sleek company newsletters or framed hallway portraits. He didn't walk through our department. He didn't mingle with the likes of me. But something in his tone, it wasn't corporate. It was personal. 2 hours later, I responded with a simple, yes, I'll be there. Thursday morning, I stood outside a mirrored elevator in the downtown tower, nerves twisting in my stomach. The receptionist had given me a guest badge and told me to go straight to the 42nd floor. As the elevator climbed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Suit a little wrinkled, eyes still tired, but at least I was standing. The doors opened into a hushed, carpeted lobby with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that looked like it belonged in a movie. A neatly dressed assistant greeted me and led me down a corridor of glass offices until we reached one with frosted doors. She knocked once. "Come in," a voice called from inside. She smiled politely and opened the door. "Mr. Kingswell will see you now." He stood as I entered, tall and composed, wearing a dark blue vest over a crisp white shirt, salt and pepper hair, strong jawline, no wedding ring. He looked like authority carved in stone, but his eyes, when they met mine, were unexpectedly warm. "Mr. Ashford," he said, offering his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," I managed, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. He gestured for me to sit. The office was elegant but not flashy. Wooden shelves. A few personal photos, none of them boastful. A painting of a horse on a hill. He sat down across from me. Not behind the desk. Right in front of me. Equal ground. "I want to begin with an apology," he said. "What happened to you should never have happened. It was unjust, inappropriate, and unprofessional. And it's being corrected." I blinked. "Corrected?" He nodded slowly. "Your former manager has been terminated. Effective immediately." I stared at him. "Wait, what?" Mr. Kingswell leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice quiet but firm. "I reviewed everything. Your performance reports, your project metrics, internal complaints, both filed and unfiled." He paused. "Including the surveillance footage of your final days there." My breath caught. "There's footage." He nodded. "Enough to tell me all I needed to know. The way you were treated was not only unethical, but deeply disappointing to me as a leader. I built this company to be better than that. I'm ashamed it happened under my roof." I sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to cry or run out of the room. "I've already spoken to Human Resources," he continued. "They'll be reaching out to you. But I wanted to speak to you first. Personally." "Why?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "Why me?" He looked at me, really looked. Not like I was a case file or a burden, but like I was a person. "Because you matter," he said plainly. "You were targeted for who you are. That's not just workplace discrimination, that's cruelty. And you are so much more than their cruelty." The words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. "I thought no one saw." "I did," he said. "Too late. But I saw." Silence settled between us. Not awkward, just heavy with everything I'd carried for months and everything he was now gently helping me set down. "I don't know what to say," I murmured. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "But if you're willing, I'd like to offer you your position back. Not in the same department. You deserve a fresh start. With me." I blinked again. "You want me to work directly for you?" "I want you somewhere safe. Somewhere your talent will be respected, and you'll be respected." For a moment, I just stared at him, at the lines near his eyes, the subtle weariness of a man who'd seen too much but still believed in trying. He was powerful, yes, but there was something else in him. Something quiet, kind. "Why are you being so kind to me?" I asked, not even sure if I wanted the answer. He gave a small smile. "Because someone should have been a long time ago." Something cracked inside me then. The shell I'd been living in since the day I was fired. Since long before that, if I was being honest. I felt warmth rising behind my eyes and quickly looked away, pretending to notice the view. He didn't push, just handed me a card. "Here's the contact for HR. I'll have a new desk and onboarding plan ready by next week. In the meantime, if you need anything, you call me directly." I looked down at the card. It had his personal extension on it. Not a secretary. Not a middleman. "Thank you," I said, standing. As we shook hands again, his hand lingered just a second longer than before. Not inappropriate. Just human. "I'll see you soon, Mr. Ashford," he said. As I left the office, something strange happened. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I mattered. Returning to the office building felt like walking back into a place where I'd once drowned. Except this time, I wasn't sinking. I had a badge again, a title, a reason to be there. But most importantly, I had someone in my corner. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor with a quiet chime. Unlike the frantic buzz of the lower departments, this level felt calm, polished, like money whispered through the air instead of being shouted from cubicles. I was greeted by name, smiled at. One assistant even stood to shake my hand. My ID photo was already updated. My desk, not shoved in a corner near the copy machine, but placed just outside the CEO's private office. near the windows with a view of the skyline. A nameplate waited for me, A. Ashford, Executive Liaison. I took a breath. This wasn't a promotion. It was a transformation. The first few days were a blur of onboarding sessions, tech briefings, and strategy meetings I never would have been invited to before. I sat beside directors who had once pretended I didn't exist, and now they asked for my input. No one snickered. No one whispered. Some even apologized, awkwardly but sincerely. It was like I had been recast, not as the office joke, but as someone worth listening to. Of course, it wasn't just the title change. It was because I worked directly for him now. Daniel Kingswell, the man whose eyes said more than his words ever did. He never brought up the past. Not the cruelty I'd endured, not the man he'd fired. Instead, he gave me work. Real work. Confidential memos. Internal strategies. Meeting notes that mattered. He treated me like I had value, not as a charity case or someone he pitied. Every morning, he greeted me with a simple "Good to see you, Ashford." And every evening, he made sure I left on time. His voice low but firm. "Don't stay too late. We need you rested." It was the little things that chipped away at my armor. Like how he remembered my coffee order after the first day. Or how he'd lean slightly closer during meetings when he spoke to me, never invading my space but never cold. Once I dropped a stack of folders. A former boss would have smirked. Daniel knelt beside me, picked up every page and quietly said, "We all drop things sometimes. And I don't know why, but I almost cried right there." I started journaling again. I hadn't touched my old notebook in months. The last entry had been written the night after I was fired, and it was filled with hopeless questions and self-loathing. But now I wrote about light. I wrote about how it felt to walk into an office and be greeted with respect. I wrote about the first time Daniel read one of my reports and said, "This is excellent. Sharp. You think 3 steps ahead." I wrote about how, when I laughed during a lunch break and caught him smiling at me across the room, I felt my chest flutter in a way I hadn't felt since high school. I wrote about how I was beginning to like myself again. One evening, about 2 weeks into my new role, he called me into his office just as I was packing up. I knocked once. "Come in." He was standing by the window, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. His hair looked windswept, like he'd run his hand through it too many times. He glanced over his shoulder. "I ordered food. Didn't feel like eating alone tonight. You hungry?" I hesitated, unsure if this was work-related or something else. "Sure," I said. We sat at the small round table in the corner of his office, sharing Thai food from cardboard containers. No laptops, no phones, just 2 people sitting together as the city turned gold outside the windows. "I've seen how hard you're working," he said between bites. "You've adapted faster than most people I've promoted." "I didn't expect any of this," I admitted. "Especially not from someone like you." He raised an eyebrow. "Someone like me? You're the CEO?" I said, smiling. "You're supposed to be distant, cold, intimidating." He chuckled, low and genuine. "Is that what I am?" "No," I said, eyes meeting his. "You're not." Something shifted in the air then. Not dramatic, just warmer. He leaned back in his chair, chopsticks resting against the edge of the box. "Can I be honest with you?" I nodded. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, trying to prove something every day, walking on eggshells because the world was built for someone louder, straighter, meaner." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. "I hit a lot," he said. "Didn't come out until I was almost 40. Built a life that looked perfect on paper and felt hollow in real time." "You're out now?" I asked, surprised. "Only to people I trust." He met my gaze. "Like you." The room was suddenly too quiet. His eyes didn't look away, and mine didn't want to. I swallowed. "Why me?" "Because you don't pretend anymore. And because—" He paused, then smiled softly. "You're easy to trust." The weeks that followed were filled with more late-night conversations. More gentle praises. More moments that blurred the line between admiration and something else. Once, He brushed a stray hair from my forehead before a big presentation and said, "You've got this. Just be yourself." Another time, he asked me to help him choose a tie for a conference, holding two options in front of me and watching my face too closely as I answered. There were moments his hand grazed mine when passing a document. Moments we shared a laugh and held eye contact a little too long. Moments I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't lust. Not entirely. It was something quieter, deeper, like he saw not just who I was, but who I could be if someone believed in me long enough. And God, it felt good to be seen. At night, I'd sit by my window, notebook in hand, and write things I never thought I'd feel again. I don't know if he feels what I feel. I don't want to assume. But when he looks at me, I feel safe. I used to think love came from loud declarations. Now I wonder if it lives in the silences between two people who just get each other. I didn't know what this was. A second chance? A slow-blooming connection? A story I was too afraid to believe? But I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer invisible. And maybe, just maybe, that meant I was ready to be loved. It started in small ways. Little flickers of confidence returning like embers catching wind. I wore color again. Not loud, not showy. Just enough to feel like myself. A moss green sweater. A silver lapel pin. A pair of shoes that didn't blend into the carpet. I stopped shrinking when I walked down the halls. Stopped whispering in meetings. Stopped apologizing for existing. I was becoming the version of me I had once buried beneath shame and survival. And he noticed. "You're glowing lately," Daniel said one afternoon, as we waited in the hallway outside a board meeting. "Am I?" I asked, half laughing, adjusting my blazer. He leaned in slightly. "Yes, it suits you." The compliment settled deep in my chest, warm and disarming. I turned away before I smiled too obviously. The office became my haven. And Daniel, well, he became something more complicated. He had a way of checking in without making it obvious. A hand on my shoulder when I nailed a report. A nod of approval from across the conference room. A private text at 9 p.m. "You handled yourself well today." When I worked late, he'd offer tea instead of coffee. Said caffeine after 7 was a sin. When I stayed past 10, he insisted on ordering dinner for both of us. "It's just food," he'd say when I protested. But it never felt like just anything with him. One evening, after a long presentation that had left both of us drained, he walked into my office and asked, "Do you have 10 minutes?" I nodded, expecting notes or corrections. Instead, he handed me 2 glasses of wine and said, "Come upstairs." He had a private terrace. I'd only heard about it, never seen it. That night, under a sky flecked with city lights, he stood beside me in silence for a long while. The sounds of traffic far below us felt like they belonged to another world. "I used to think success would fix everything," he said finally. I looked at him. "Did it?" "No," he replied, voice low. "It just made the loneliness quieter, easier to ignore, but it never really left." I didn't answer, just sipped the wine, listening. "I had a partner once," he added. "Years ago, before the company took over my life. Before I decided it was safer to love behind closed doors." "Do you still talk?" I asked gently. He shook his head. He got tired of waiting for me to choose him over this. He gestured around at the terrace, the office, the empire. "I'm sorry," I said, because it was the only thing I could offer. He looked at me then, and his eyes were soft in a way I hadn't seen before. "Don't be. I made my choices. But sometimes, I wonder what it would have been like to build a life with someone who saw me. Not just the CEO, not the headlines. Just me." His words settled in my bones. Because I knew that feeling. I'd spent most of my life waiting for someone to see me, too. We didn't say much after that. Just stood shoulder to shoulder, 2 men too used to hiding. 2 men who maybe didn't want to hide anymore. In the weeks that followed, something shifted between us. Nothing overt. Nothing anyone else would notice. But I felt it. In the way his hand lingered a second longer on my back. In the way he pulled out my chair in private meetings. In the way he said good morning like it meant something. One afternoon, as I was leaving, he called out, "Ashford, wait." I turned. He walked toward me, holding a leather notebook. "You left this in the boardroom." It was mine, my personal one, the one I journaled in. My heart stopped. "Did you read it?" He shook his head, offering it to me. "No, but I could feel it mattered to you." I took it from his hands. Our fingers brushed, and for a moment neither of us moved. "I don't want to cross any lines," he said softly, searching my face. "But I hope you know. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Something inside me wanted to lean into him, to ask if he meant it the way I thought he did, to ask if he ever thought about me when we weren't working. But I didn't, because I still wasn't sure if this was real, or just the side effect of being seen after so long in the dark. I found myself watching him more, noticing things. The way his sleeves were always perfectly rolled. The way he bit the inside of his cheek when he was thinking. The way his voice dropped when he said my name. He was beautiful in a quiet, composed kind of way. The kind of beauty you didn't see until you were close enough to feel it. And I was dangerously close. I knew the power dynamics. I knew the rules. He was my boss, my protector, my rescuer. Was it wrong to fall for the man who saved me? Or was it human? Because the truth was I was falling. Not because he gave me a desk or defended my worth. But because when I laughed, he laughed too. Because when I doubted myself, he reminded me who I was. Because when he looked at me, I felt safe, whole, real. One night, I wrote in my journal, "There's something happening between us. Not declared. Not denied. It lives in the glances, the silences, the things unsaid. I don't know if I should fight it, or if I'm already his, without ever being touched." A week later, we stayed late working on a confidential report for the board. It was past midnight when I stood to leave, my eyes heavy with sleep. "Let me walk you out," he said, already rising. We stepped into the empty hallway together. Just the two of us. The elevator pinged softly. As we waited, I looked up at him and asked, "Do you ever get scared?" He turned toward me, surprised by the question. "Scared of what?" "Of being vulnerable. Of wanting something too much." His eyes lingered on mine. All the time. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. He didn't. As they closed between us, he said quietly, "Good night, Ashford." I pressed my hand to my chest, where his voice seemed to echo, and whispered to no one, "Good night, Daniel." It happened gradually, so quietly that I didn't realize we had drifted into something more than friendship until it was already happening. One late work night turned into two. A casual dinner became a quiet tradition. A shared ride home after a meeting downtown became a habit neither of us questioned. We never planned it, never named it, but something was growing in the space between us. Something warmer than comfort and deeper than professionalism. One evening, after an exhausting day full of back-to-back meetings, Daniel offered to drive me home. His driver was off and I had missed the last train. "I'm heading that way anyway," he said. He wasn't. Still, I said yes. We sat in the dim warmth of his black sedan, city lights streaking past the windows like soft gold threads. His playlist hummed quietly between us. Instrumental jazz, smooth and intimate. At a red light, he glanced over at me and smiled. "You look tired." "I am," I admitted, "but not unhappy." He nodded once, eyes still on me. "You're glowing again." I laughed softly. "You've said that before." "Because it keeps being true." I looked out the window, heart fluttering, cheeks burning. That was the thing about Daniel. His compliments didn't feel like flattery. They felt like facts he'd carefully observed. The light turned green and the moments slipped by. Days like that became our rhythm. He'd leave a note on my desk. "Dinner tonight?" Sometimes just a smile and a raised brow when our schedules aligned. Sometimes I'd beat him to it, texting, "Still working?" I could eat. There were no grand gestures, no candlelight, no confessions, just quiet things, like him ordering my favorite dish before I arrived, like me refilling his tea without being asked, like us laughing over something no one else would find funny. It was in those quiet moments that I started to hope, and that terrified me, One evening, we ate at a small rooftop place not far from the office, tucked between two glass towers, strung with old bulbs and grapevines. He wore a dark button-up, sleeves rolled, collar open at the throat. I couldn't stop staring. At one point, he caught me. "What is it?" he asked, eyes soft. "Nothing," I said quickly, looking away. "Just thinking." He leaned closer, elbows on the table. "You've changed, Ashford." "How so?" "You carry yourself differently. You're not hiding anymore." I hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe I feel safe for the first time." He sat back, thoughtful, then said, almost to himself, "You deserve someone who makes you feel that way all the time." The words hit deeper than he probably intended. I stared at my wine glass. "People like me, we don't always get that." "You do," he said quietly. "You deserve to be cherished." The table fell silent. I swallowed, throat thick. "You say things like that, and I don't know how to hold them. I'm afraid if I believe them, they'll vanish." He tilted his head. "Do you trust me?" "Yes," I whispered instantly. "Then believe me." Later that night, back at my apartment, the walls felt too thin, the air too still. I sat on my couch, fully clothed, and cried. Not from sadness, but from the fear of hope. Because what if I was falling for him? What if I already had? The next evening, after a long executive strategy session, Daniel called me into his office. He was pacing when I entered, jacket off, hair slightly tousled. "You okay?" I asked. He stopped and looked at me, really looked at me, then walked over and closed the door. "I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter," he said. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Pretending what doesn't matter?" I asked, voice trembling. He stepped closer, not touching, not looming, just present. "You," he said. "This. Us. The way I wait for you to walk into a room. The way I replay your laugh in my head after you leave. The way I feel lighter when you're near me." Couldn't breathe. "I know I'm your boss," he said gently. "And I've tried so hard to keep things professional. But I'd be lying if I said I haven't thought about you. Wished things were different. Wished I could." "Stop," I said, voice cracking. He froze. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "No," I said, stepping forward. "Stop because I can't take it anymore." He blinked. "I've been trying so hard not to feel this. Not to need this. Not to want you." My hands were shaking. Because I didn't think I was allowed to be wanted. Not really. I turned away, breath catching. "Do you know what it's like to go your whole life thinking people are only nice to you because they feel sorry for you?" He said nothing, but I heard the movement, his quiet approach. Then his hand on my shoulder. Warm. Grounding. "You're not a pity project," he said gently. "You're not a fantasy. You're real. And you're beautiful just as you are." The words opened something in me I didn't know was still locked. I turned around slowly. He was close. So close. And this time I didn't step back. The kiss was nothing like I imagined. It wasn't urgent or hungry. It didn't crash into me like a wave. It unfolded like a breath. He leaned in slowly, watching my eyes the whole time, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. When his lips touched mine, I closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. His hand rose to my cheek, gentle, steady. I leaned into it like a man discovering touch for the first time. There was no rush, no expectation, just warmth and breath and quiet knowing. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke for a while. He pressed his forehead against mine. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whispered. "Me neither," I said. "But I don't want it to stop." That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one hand over my chest, feeling my heart beat like it finally remembered what it was for. And in my journal I wrote, "For the first time I felt wanted, not for my work, not for my silence, not for how well I hid, but for my soul." There was no grand announcement, no press release, no HR memo. Just the quiet rhythm of two lives slowly sinking into one. It started with weekends. "Come with me," Daniel would say, eyes soft, voice low. like it was a secret just between us. We'd drive out of the city, to quiet cabins tucked into pine forests, to sleepy lakeside inns with no reception, to vineyards where no one knew our names. There, I saw a different version of him. Not the CEO, just a man who liked his coffee black, who read poetry before bed, who always packed too many button-downs but wore the same soft gray t-shirt every morning. There I laughed louder, slept deeper, loved harder. At the office we were careful. Not cold, just professional. He called me by my last name. I kept our distance in meetings. We left at different times. There were no stolen glances, no office gossip, at least not from us. But the others, they filled in the blanks with their own ugliness. Whispers followed me again, this time laced with jealousy instead of cruelty. Must be nice having that kind of access to the top. No wonder he got promoted so fast. He always gets what he wants. Must be his smile. One afternoon, I walked past two old coworkers from my previous department, the same ones who used to mock my voice, my walk, my clothes. One of them muttered just loud enough, "Guess being pretty finally paid off." The words didn't sting like they used to, not because they weren't cruel, but because I wasn't small anymore. Still, when I returned to my desk, my hands trembled. Later that day, Daniel found me staring blankly at a spreadsheet. He didn't ask. He just closed the door behind him and sat beside me. I heard what they said. I looked away. "It's fine." "No," he said gently. "It's not." I didn't expect what happened next. At the next all-staff meeting, full company, dozens of employees seated in the sleek conference hall, Daniel stepped up to the podium, looked out over the crowd, and said, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone." He looked directly at me. "Ashford has become one of the most valuable voices in our leadership strategy. His insights have shaped decisions at the highest level. If any of you are unclear on why he's here, it's not because he's close to me. It's because he earned it." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some shifted in their chairs. Others glanced my way. I didn't shrink. I met their eyes, and I smiled, because for once I wasn't defending myself. Someone powerful was standing beside me, and not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The annual corporate gala came 2 weeks later. I almost didn't go. Crowds still made me uneasy, especially when I knew I'd be walking into a room full of the same people who once laughed at my voice, who saw me as something soft and strange. But Daniel surprised me. "You're not going as an employee," he said, adjusting his cufflinks in front of the mirror. "You're going as my guest." My heart stuttered. "Is that allowed?" He turned to face me, expression unreadable. "I've spent most of my life following rules that were built to keep people like me quiet. I'm done with that." He reached out and fixed my tie, slow, deliberate, fingers brushing my chest. "I want them to see you," he said, "the way I do." That night, I walked into the gala beside him. The room stilled when we entered, like someone had pulled the sound out of the air. Daniel didn't flinch. He placed a hand gently at the small of my back and guided me through the room like we belonged there. Because we did. People stared. Some with curiosity, some with judgment, some with quiet respect. But I didn't look down. I stood taller than I ever had. Later, as we stood beneath the chandeliers, sipping champagne, I spotted one of my old managers across the room, the one who once told me I wasn't a good fit for company culture. He looked at me now like he was trying to understand how the same person could exist in this version. Confident, composed, and loved. And I realized something. This was my revenge. Not screaming at them. Not proving them wrong with spreadsheets or numbers. Not tearing them down with the truth they'd buried. My revenge was living. Unapologetically. Freely. Loved by someone powerful, and not just because he could, but because he chose me. That night, after the gala, Daniel and I sat on his balcony, barefoot, wine in hand. The city sparkled below us. "I used to dream of this," I said quietly, "of being seen, of not hiding, but I never thought it would look like this." He looked at me, the kind of gaze that wraps around you like warmth. "Do you regret anything?" "No," I said, Not anymore. He leaned over and kissed me, soft, slow, with the ease of someone who no longer needed to pretend. And I whispered against his lips, I'm not afraid of them anymore. Later, curled against him under a blanket, I traced circles on his chest and asked, what changed for you? He paused, then said, You. You reminded me that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stays, even when it's scared. I smiled. You're not scared anymore? He looked down at me. No, because you're here. I fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat and the quiet hum of the city below. And in that silence I understood. Revenge wasn't about making them feel what I felt. It was about never letting them make me feel that way again. 6 months later, my mornings looked different. I still arrived early, habit more than necessity, but now I walked through the executive doors with confidence, not fear. I had a team of my own. I led weekly strategy briefings. Senior partners listened when I spoke. Even the board asked for my analysis. But the biggest difference wasn't the office. It was what waited for me after it. Daniel, every evening without fail, he'd peek into my glass-walled workspace, knock gently and say, You done saving the company yet? And I'd smile, gather my things and follow him home. We never moved fast, but we moved deeply. After the gala, things became clearer between us. He invited me into more than just his bed. He invited me into his life. I learned how he liked his coffee, precisely 3 sugars, no cream. He learned that I cried at movie endings, even the happy ones. We found our rhythm. Not loud, not rushed, just honest. He called me his calm. I called him my storm made gentle. We still kept things private from the world, but in our world we were everything. We took weekend trips without pretending to be just friends. He held my hand when we walked on the beach at midnight. And when I got sick for 3 days, he brought soup and stayed on the couch beside me until I was well again. This wasn't fantasy. It was love, grown in kindness, rooted in truth. One Friday evening, the office was quiet, most of the staff gone early for the weekend. I stayed behind to finalize a quarterly projection. Daniel hadn't texted, which was odd. He was usually the one reminding me not to overwork myself. Just as I was shutting down my laptop, I saw him standing in the doorway of my office. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie loose, his eyes softer than usual. Come upstairs, he said. I blinked. Everything okay? He only smiled. Upstairs, in his private terrace office, I noticed things were different. Candles flickered in small hurricane lanterns across the balcony railing. 2 glasses of wine waited on the coffee table. And in the center of it all, a simple black box. My breath caught. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech. He just walked up to me, took my hands in his and said, I've spent most of my life building things, companies, numbers, strategies. But the only thing I've ever truly wanted to build was a life with someone who made me feel safe in my own skin. He paused, eyes shining. I don't just want you as my partner in work, he said, voice trembling. I want you as my partner in life. He opened the box. Inside wasn't a traditional ring. It was a silver band. Simple, elegant. Engraved with a line I'd written once in my journal. You deserve someone who cherishes you. I covered my mouth, tears flooding my eyes before I could speak. I don't need a ceremony. Or a headline, he added. I just need you. Every day. I couldn't find the words, so I nodded. And then I whispered, Yes. He slid the band onto my finger. I threw my arms around him, laughing and crying all at once. I've never felt more loved than I do with you, I said into his shoulder. You've always been lovable, he whispered back. They just didn't know how to see you. We didn't make a public statement. We didn't have to. People noticed anyway. The way he reached for my hand when we thought no one was looking. The way we left together every evening. The way he introduced me, not as my assistant or my colleague, but simply Ashford, the person I trust most in this world. In every way that mattered, I had become his husband. Not legally, not yet, but in spirit, in routine, in devotion, and in truth. I wasn't just his wife. I was his equal, his compass, his soft place to fall. Some mornings I still wake before him. I sit by the window in our shared apartment, coffee in one hand, journal in the other, and I write, not out of sorrow or pain but gratitude. Gratitude for the boy I used to be, the one who cried quietly in bathroom stalls, the one who tried to shrink himself into safety, the one who thought no one would ever call him beautiful, because that boy survived long enough to become this man, the man who wears a silver band on his finger, who is loved by someone who once lived behind boardroom walls, who wakes up beside the man who made him believe he was never too much or not enough. And sometimes, when I lie in bed, curled against Daniel's chest, he traces circles on my back and says, I don't care if the world sees you as my wife or my husband. What matters is this: when I hold you, I know I'm home. And I believe him, because I've learned that home isn't a place. It's a heartbeat, a whisper of trust, a safe hand reaching out when yours starts to shake. Closing reflection. I was fired for being gay, humiliated, undermined, shoved aside. But in losing that job, I found everything I had ever dreamed of: respect, love, and a home in his arms. Have you ever been underestimated or pushed aside, only to rise stronger than ever? Tell us in the comments. What moment in your life made you finally feel seen, respected, or loved? And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you never miss a powerful love story like this one.